Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Swathi. In this video, let's learn about what is demand and supply. Let's first learn about the demand. Demand is considered mainly in the perspective of the consumer or buyer in the market because they are the one who will initiate the demand in the market. Why do they demand? It is just to fulfill their daily needs. For example, to purchase grocery, ration, clothes, or some of the electronic needs, etc. What does the demand depends on? That means what are the factors that influence the demand of the consumers? First one is price of the product. Before buying any of the product, consumer will check into its price. They will look for some discount or concession. If the price is reasonable, then only they'll go for purchasing the product. And the second factor is price of the related product. For example, a consumer want to buy a mobile. Then what does the consumer do? They will go on comparing the prices of other different mobile which has same working feature. Finally, they'll purchase the one which has reasonable price. And the third one is income of the consumer. This is the very important factor because the purchasing power of the consumer is determined by his level of income. Whatever the income he has, he can spend on for his daily needs, right? Fourth one is taste and preferences. Finally, the taste and preferences of the consumers also matters, which in turn influence their choice of purchasing the product. So now let's see what is law of demand. When all the factors remain constant, then at lower price, quantity demanded is more than quantity demanded at higher price. That means the factors which I have mentioned here is about the elements on which demand depends upon. As we just studied now earlier, that is price of the product, price of the related product, income of the consumer, taste and preferences, right? If we consider when all these factors remain constant, then when the price of the product is less, then demand will more. And when the price of the product is more, then demand is less. Here you can see when the price of the quantity is increasing, then demand is decreasing. On the other side, when the price of the quantity is decreasing, then demand is increasing, right? So let's see how law of demand is represented through a graph. Here price is taken on the y-axis and quantity is taken on the x-axis. When price of the product is more or increasing, then quantity of such product demanded is less. You can clearly see in the graph that price and demand are inversely proportional. When one is increasing, the other is decreasing. So it shows an downward slope. Next, let's understand about the supply. Supply is always considered in terms or in the perspective of supplier in the market. We have already saw what demand depends upon, and now let's see what supply depends upon. First one is price of the product. Earlier we have discussed that price of the product was in the perspective of demand that the consumer was concerned about. But here the price of the product is in the perspective of supply, where supplier is concerned. When the supplier finds out that the price of the product is increasing in the market, then what supplier does? He will increase his production and try to supply more products into the market so that he can gain the profit. And the second factor is price of the other related product. We find same product in the market which are of different brands or from different manufacturers. For example, there are number of laptops in the market of different brands, right? So here what supplier does, he will analyze the price of such related products in the market and accordingly plan on the supply of his product at a considerable rate, whichever fetches him profit. And the third factor is change in technology. Here supplier should also keep track on the changing trends in the technology with the time and modify his products accordingly so that the supplier will not fall in short of his profit margin. If the adaptation of the technology costs more, that could affect the overall production cost for the supplier. And the fourth one is change in the cost of the production. If there is increase in the purchasing cost of the raw materials, because some of the raw materials could be imported, there is also a chance of increase in the import cost, or maybe there is rise in the labor cost at the domestic level. This all adds up to the cost of the production, which makes the overall production costlier. Fifth factor is taxes and subsidies. If there is more tax imposed by the government on the production units, then supply will be affected. It's not always there will be increase in the tax rate. If the tax rate is reduced, then that will benefit the supplier. In the same way, there is any incentives or subsidies are provided, that will also add up to the advantage of the supplier to supply more goods in the market. The last one is transportation cost. Transport expenses is also a factor upon which supply of goods is dependent. If there is rise in the transportation cost, that will again affect the supply side. All these are the factors upon which supplier is dependent to supply their goods in the market. Fine. Now let's see what is law of supply. When all the other factors remain constant, then the supply at higher price will be more as compared to supply at lower price. Here factors refers to those which supply depends. All those factors which we have discussed just now, that is price of the product, price of the related products and so on. Here when the price of the product is more, then supply is also more. If the price of the product is less, then even the supply is also less. Here you can see when price of the quantity is increasing, then supply is also increasing. On the other side, when the price of the quantity is decreasing, then supply is also decreasing. This is how they are related. We have already seen how law of demand is represented in the graph. And now let's see how law of supply is represented through a graph. Even here y-axis represents price and x-axis represents quantity. When price of the product is more, then supply of the product is also more. You can clearly see in the graph that price and supply are directly proportionate to each other. If one increases, the other will also increases. The next concept is market equilibrium. Finally, let's see the relation between demand and supply by combining both demand and supply graph, which gives us the market equilibrium. As we have merged both the graph, y-axis still represents price and x-axis represents quantity. Here we can see the point where demand and supply graph meets is called as equilibrium point or market equilibrium. At this point, all the factors which we have discussed earlier on which the demand and supply depends are considered as constant. This point denotes there is a balance in price of the product in the market. I'll explain you how. See, beyond the equilibrium point, we can see the increase in the supply. Hence, there is a surplus of supply in the market. This is called as surplus situation. That means there are more number of suppliers in the market for less number of consumers. Why less number of consumers? Because a supply is only increased when there is an increase in the price of the product. Hence, demand from the buyers will be less. Okay. In this situation, what sellers does, they will compete among themselves and try to decrease the price of the product so that more buyers can come and buy their product. At this point, graph would come down to the equilibrium point. Because of decrease in the price of the product, supply will gradually decreases. And this leads to situation called shortage situation, where consumers face shortage of product. As price is low, there is more demand by the buyers, right? Obviously, whenever price is low, buyers will be more. So as there is more demand for the product and less supply, again price of the product will increase and gradually supply increases. This cycle repeats in the market where sometimes it goes to surplus situation and sometimes towards shortage situation. I hope you understood the concept. Thanks for watching. If you like my initiative, then please do like, share and subscribe to my channel.